ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ। ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀਕਲਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਸ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਬੁਲਟਨ 'ਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਆਓ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਮਾਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਖਾਸ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਤੇ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ 2 ਦਿਨਾਂ ਕੈਬਨਿਟ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਸ਼ਮੂਲੀਅਤ। ਕਿਹਾ ਕਰੋਨਾ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਮੁਲਕ 'ਚ ਆਈਆਂ ਕਮੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ ਦੂਰ। ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਸਕੂਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਧਿਰ ਨੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਕੀਤੀ ਘੇਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼। ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ $1.3 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਰੱਖਣ ਲਈ ਕੀਤਾ ਦਾਅਵਾ। ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀ ਬੋਨੀ ਹੈਨਰੀ ਨੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੀਆਂ ਆਊਟਬ੍ਰੇਕਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ। ਕਿਹਾ BC ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਸ਼ੁੱਕਰਵਾਰ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਨੀਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ 137 ਕਰੋਨਾ ਦੇ ਕੇਸ ਆਏ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ। ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਨਾਲ। ਮਿਸੀਸਾਗਾ ਤੇ ਪੀਲ ਰੀਜਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਪੀਡਿੰਗ ਅਤੇ ਸਟਰੀਟ ਰੇਸਿੰਗ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡੀ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਹੈ। ਮਿਸੀਸਾਗਾ ਸਟਰੀਟਸ ਬਿੱਲ ਤੋਂ MPP ਨੀਨਾ ਤਾਂਗੜੀ ਨੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ OPP ਹਾਈਵੇ ਸੇਫਟੀ ਡਿਵੀਜ਼ਨ ਡਿਟੈਚਮੈਂਟ ਸਥਾਪਿਤ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸੋਲਿਸਿਟਰ ਜਨਰਲ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਡਿਟੈਚਮੈਂਟ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਹਾਈ ਸਿੱਧ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਤਾਂਗੜੀ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਮਈ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਾਈਵੇ 403 ਤੇ OPP ਵੱਲੋਂ 207 ਕਿਲੋਮੀਟਰ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਘੰਟੇ ਦੀ ਰਫ਼ਤਾਰ ਕਾਰ ਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਚਾਰਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ। ਸੋਲਿਸਿਟਰ ਜਨਰਲ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ।
Last week, I was pleased to join the Solicitor General and Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner Carrick to open a new OPP Highway Safety Division detachment in my riding of Mississauga Streetsville. I know that constituents in my community have been concerned about safety on our roads and highways, especially during COVID-19 pandemic. In May, for example, the OPP charged an individual for going 207 kilometres per hour on Highway 403 in Mississauga. This reflects a widespread increase in street racing and other driving offences on our roads and highways in the midst of COVID. Can the Solicitor General explain how this new OPP detachment will help support community safety in Mississauga, particularly on our highways? Thank you.
Solicitor General.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the member for Mississauga Streetsville for her question. I know how important road safety is to her and her constituents. And I was pleased to join her and many other Peel MPPs, as well as Commissioner Parikh in Mississauga last week. Now, I think it's really important that we understand as we continue to respond to the unprecedented challenges presented by COVID-19, our government will continue to put safety first. Every day, hundreds of thousands of commuter vehicles and transport trucks use the 400 series highways in the region, which is why it's critical that police have the tools, resources, and equipment needed to keep people safe. This $200 million state-of-the-art facility will bring policing in the region to the 21st century, ensuring that frontline OPP officers who are working to keep the 400 series highway safe in Peel region and across the GTA can continue to do it with updated resources. Thank you.
And the supplementary question.
Speaker, through you, thank you to the Solicitor General for her response. We know that while police services are reporting that some crime statistics have dropped during the course of this crisis, not all criminals are staying home. In August, Peel Regional Police seized 41 illegal guns off our streets. I'm sure we can all agree that in the midst of this crisis, the last thing people need is fear of crime in their community. Can the Solicitor General explain how the opening of this new OPP detachment in Mississauga fits our government's commitment to keeping our communities safe?
And the Solicitor General.
Thank you, Speaker. The member is absolutely correct. Ontarians should never have to live in fear of crime, least of all during the pandemic. The opening of the Mississauga detachment is part of our government's OPP Modernisation Phase 2 project. This is a $182 million initiative to replace 9 ageing police detachments across Ontario and bring them into the 21st century. Many of these projects are coming to fruition, including Little Current, Parry Sound, Clinton, with more in the coming weeks, and of course the one in the member's riding in Mississauga. This builds on a landmark $20 million investment our government has made in Peel region with their police service earlier this year. Whether it's addressing road user safety on our highways or tackling the pressing issue of gun and gang violence, our government is committed to ensuring that those in the front line have the resources to keep their communities protected.
ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ 2 ਦਿਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਮੂਲੀਅਤ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਪੱਤਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਸਮਾਂ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਨਾਲ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਨਿਕਲਣਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਹੈ। ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕੋਰੋਨਾ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੀਆਂ ਕਮੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਈਆਂ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੂਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ।
As I said, our focus right now is on the COVID crisis. We need to get through this in order to be able to talk about next steps. So a lot of what we're going to be doing during this retreat will be talking about how we continue to keep COVID under control, continue to make sure that Canadians are safe, that we're not overloading our healthcare system. These are the things that we are focused on. These are the things that we're going to dig into. Obviously, COVID has exposed weaknesses in our country where vulnerable people are continuing to slip through the cracks. We will have conversations about next steps as well, but our focus is very much on what we need to do to control COVID-19. We are not out of the woods. We need to continue to remain vigilant. We need to be there for each other by keeping our distances, washing our hands, wearing masks, an awful lot, and really demonstrating that we know that it's what every single one of us can do and must do that will control the spread of this virus. The last thing anyone wants is to go into this fall in a lockdown similar to this spring, and the way we can prevent that is by remaining vigilant.
ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਸਕੂਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਧਿਰ ਨੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਘੇਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਧਿਰ ਦੀ ਲੀਡਰ ਐਂਡਰੀਆ ਹਾਰਵਥ ਨੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਬੱਸਾਂ ਰੱਦ ਹੋਣ, ਇੱਕ ਸੀਟ ਤੇ 3-3 ਬੱਚੇ ਬਿਠਾਉਣ ਵਰਗੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਲਈ ਯੋਗ ਫੰਡ ਐਲਾਨਣ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਸਟੀਫਨ ਲੀਚੀ ਨੇ ਦਾਅਵਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ $1.3 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਰੱਖਣ ਲਈ ਰੱਖੇ ਨੇ।
And in fact, as I was coming into the House this morning, I was informed that those numbers are now over 300 at 313. And so parents are, of course, very nervous as they prepare to send their kids back to school. Thousands of those students, Speaker, learned just over this past week that their school bus was cancelled. Most often because school bus drivers actually fear for their own safety and the safety of the kids. Earlier this summer, the Premier of this province said that he was sparing nothing when it comes to the safe return to school. When will he live up to that, Speaker? When will he live up to that and provide the money necessary to keep our kids safe?
To reply on behalf of the government, the Minister of Education.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. Mr. Speaker, I know as uncles and aunts, moms and dads and grandparents across the province, we are all committed to the safety of our kids. And Speaker, our plan that has been unveiled has been fully supported by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. It is fully funded, is evidence-informed, Speaker. What I can say is, as we face an unprecedented challenge in this province, I am proud of our people who have responded with a strong resolve to work together to flatten this curve and allow our kids to remain learning in schools. And Speaker, our plan, $1.3 billion of investment flowing to our school boards, has enabled smaller classroom sizes, robust testing in our schools, a screening apparatus before they enter the school. Speaker, it also is supported by the hiring of more support staff, more custodians, more cleaning, and Speaker, improvements to ventilation. We know what's at stake. We will do everything possible, including more resources and more investments, to keep all students and all staff safe in the province of Ontario.
The supplementary question.
Well, Speaker, experts at the Hospital for Sick Children, even the government's own experts have said that students should maintain a 2-metre distance from each other. Given that, can the Premier tell us how many students he feels should be seated on a school bus with 24 seats?
Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government unveiled net investments for student transportation because we know how important it is for moms and dads to have their children get to school safely every single day. And that's the basis, Speaker, for why we have invested an additional $40 million for the driver retention program. This helps to incent more drivers, bus drivers, in our schools. It also ensures, Speaker, by providing PPE to all bus drivers, we're keeping them safe. We've added $25 million on route protection, an additional $30 million, Speaker, to ensure that they're safe and that they're cleaned. We've done everything possible to ensure assigned seating on our buses, to ensure a lower quantum on them, and more importantly, Speaker, that they are constantly cleaned throughout the day. We will continue to support our drivers, our schools and our parents as we get through this unprecedented challenge.
The final supplementary.
Well, Speaker, last week, a woman named Angela, a driver from Durham, reached out to our office with the same concerns that parents have been expressing. And a copy of her route she provided to us, which showed 68 children on a single bus at once. 68 children, Speaker, on one 24-seat bus. That is 3 kids per seat on a standard school bus, Speaker. So how can Ontario's children and the school bus drivers expect to stay safe in these cramped conditions? It doesn't make any sense. Perhaps the Premier can tell us exactly how those folks are going to stay safe.
Again, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how our buses are going to remain safe is by ensuring that they are constantly cleaned, which is why, Speaker, we've invested an additional $40 million so that our operators, our consortia, and our school boards have the financial latitude to ensure that they are constantly cleaned, those high-contact places are cleaned often. More importantly, Speaker, PPE and masking is required, like in schools, on our buses. A full suite of PPE is provided to our workers, to our bus drivers, and likewise training for them. Speaker, we put in more funding for route protection because in this province, like in all provinces, for well over a decade, we have faced a driver shortage that I know all members in this House are cognizant of. It precedes our election, but nonetheless, it is our priority to ensure that we retain that talent. We have committed workers that are going to get our kids to school every day.
ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਧਿਰ ਨੇ ਸ਼ਬਦੀ ਹੱਲੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਓਟਾਵਾ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹੁਣ 15 ਹੋਰ ਕੇਸ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਆਖਿਰ ਕੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ 30 ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਕਲਾਸ ਰੱਖੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਕਲਾਸਰੂਮਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਅਸੰਭਵ ਹੈ। ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਧਿਰ ਨੇ ਮੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਕਲਾਸਰੂਮ ਸਾਈਜ਼ ਘਟਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਕੁਝ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ। ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨੇ ਸਾਫ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਕਲਾਸ ਸਾਈਜ਼ ਘਟਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਅਧਿਆਪਕਾਂ ਸਮੇਤ ਬਾਕੀ ਮੁਲਾਜ਼ਮਾਂ ਦੀ ਭਰਤੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ।
Speaker, for a lot of parents, this has been a very anxious weekend, with COVID-19 cases on the rise again and serious concerns across Ontario about the government's school readiness plan. Last week, we saw hundreds of students in Ottawa kept home, and according to the government's own data reporting site, today we have 15 new cases in schools. I'm hearing from parents in all corners of this province who are alarmed that their children will be in classes as large as 30. So, Speaker, through you to the Premier, why has the government refused to fund the smaller, safer classrooms needed to keep our students safely distanced?
Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, this province and government has invested $1.3 billion in monies to flow to respond to this challenge and to ensure that our kids and to our staff remain safe. Speaker, in the context of classroom sizes, in Toronto District School Board, where the member hails, for context, in the more intensively staffed schools, in those communities with higher risk, for context, in kindergarten, they are capped, Speaker, to grade 3 at 15 students. From grades 4 to 8, they are capped at 20 students. In every region of this province, we are seeing net reductions in classroom sizes. We are seeing more distancing. We are seeing over 2,000 teachers being hired, according to estimates by the ministry. And, Mr. Speaker, we're seeing more custodians being hired, more public health nurses. We had 460 public health nurses in this province dedicated to schools. Under this government's leadership, more than 517 were hired as of today, and we are on track to hire 625, more than doubling capacity of those medical practitioners within our school. In every realm we lead, we will continue to be responsive to the risk and take further action to ensure all students are safe in this province.
Supplementary question. Again, the member for Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll point out to the minister that the TDSB dug into their own reserves to bring some of those schools to 15. Why won't you give the same thing to the rest of the students in this province? Speaker, the minister says that more funding for school preparedness is going to be available on an as-needed basis. But with families in Peel region and elsewhere pulling their children out of class by the thousands this weekend, it's more clear than ever that funding is needed now, not weeks or months from now. Speaker, parents, employers, communities don't want to wait and see who gets sick and hope for the best. They want the government to do everything possible right now to prevent the spread of COVID-19 before it's too late. Will the government finally treat this with the seriousness it deserves and flow the money needed to ensure smaller classes across this province, safer buses, and more student supports?
And ask all the members to make their remarks through the chair. Minister of Education to reply.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. Let me affirm to this House what we are doing. 37 million pieces of PPE have been delivered to schools for the month of September, thanks to the leadership of Minister Thompson for ensuring that we have a supply chain that continues to flow the products that we need to keep them safe. 517 more public health nurses have been hired as of today, more than doubling capacity of public health nurses within our school. Over 1,300 custodians expected to be hired through this process and more over the coming weeks. Over 2,500 educators are expected to be hired as a consequence of our aim to reduce classroom sizes and maximize distancing, Speaker. And we are the only province, and proudly to have an asymptomatic testing regime that will focus on those higher risk communities. Mr. Speaker, we have unveiled $1.3 billion in funding available. To correct the member opposite, it's not just in Toronto District Catholic and public school boards that have reduced classroom sizes. In every single school board, they have taken action. Provided by funding by the province, supported by the reserve funding, supported by the federal funding. We are all doing our part to ensure that classroom sizes could be reduced and ultimately our schools could be safe. Speaker.
ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੀ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀ ਬੋਨੀ ਹੈਨਰੀ ਨੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੀਆਂ ਆਊਟਬ੍ਰੇਕਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਬੋਲਦਿਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ BC ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੇ ਸ਼ੁੱਕਰਵਾਰ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਨੀਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ 137 ਕਰੋਨਾ ਦੇ ਕੇਸ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ। ਸ਼ਨੀਵਾਰ ਅਤੇ ਐਤਵਾਰ 119 ਨਵੇਂ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ 2 ਦਿਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ 66 ਨਵੇਂ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ।
So we're reporting for 3 reporting periods today. From Friday to Saturday, we had 137 people diagnosed with COVID-19. Between Saturday and Sunday, there was an additional 119 cases. And from Sunday to today, we had an additional 61 people diagnosed, bringing the total for the weekend to 317 new cases, including 4 who were epidemiologically linked. Our total in British Columbia now stands at 7,279 people with COVID-19. And that includes 2,557 in the Vancouver coastal area, 3,754 people in the Fraser Health region, 195 people on the Vancouver Island Health region, 473 people in the Interior Health region, 216 now in the Northern Health region, and 84 people who reside outside of Canada. We've now are up to 1,594 active cases in British Columbia in all health authorities, of whom 58 now are in hospital, 16 of whom are in critical care or ICU. Sadly, this past weekend, we've had 6 additional people die from COVID-19. Bringing the total to 219 people. And again, 5 of the 6 people were elders in our long-term care system, 4 in the Fraser Health region, and 1 person in Vancouver Coastal Health. And we've had our first tragic death in the Northern Health area. Once again, our thoughts and our condolences go to the families, to the communities, the people who care for these loved ones who they've lost under these most difficult conditions. We now have 3,047 people who are under active public health monitoring and 5,446 people who have recovered. We have no new healthcare outbreaks, and in a bit of good news, we have 4 that are now declared over. The second outbreak at Holy Family Hospital.
Ontario ਦੀ ਐਸੋਸੀਏਟ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਯਾਫੀ ਨੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੀਆਂ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਸਥਿਤੀ ਤੇ ਚਾਨਣਾ ਪਾਇਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ 'ਚ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੇ ਮਾਮਲਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਵਾਧਾ ਦਰਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਦੌਰਾਨ 313 ਨਵੇਂ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਕੰਮਾਂ ਤੇ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਕੰਮਾਂ ਤੇ ਚਾਨਣਾ ਪਾਇਆ।
In the last few weeks, we certainly have seen the number of COVID-19 cases going up. In the last 4 days in particular, our daily case numbers have jumped over 200. And today we have recorded 313 new cases. These numbers are concerning, especially as we know students are now returning to school. As has been the recent trend, the new cases are primarily concentrated in 3 areas: Toronto, Peel, and Ottawa. And the cases are mainly in the 20 to 39 age group. In fact, over 50% of them are in that age group, followed by the 40 to 59 age group. We have been in touch with the local medical officers of health for these regions to discuss this recent increase in cases, and all of them have identified similar issues and concerns. As the Premier and Minister of Health indicated earlier today, the primary area of concern is social gatherings. mostly and particularly in private settings. We do understand how hard it has been on everyone these last few months. We know there's a desire to interact with your friends and family and those outside your social circle. But we are now seeing the effects of people being too casual. Individuals are coming together, they're not practicing social distancing, and they're not wearing masks. None of us wants to return to the restrictive measures that were imposed earlier this year. We've already shown that we can slow the transmission of this virus to keep our community safe, and we can do it again. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. This means we all need to continue to wear masks when you need to, or when you cannot maintain your physical distance. Stay home when you're sick. Stay 2 meters or 6 feet apart from those outside your social circle, and that includes when you're in a social gathering, and wash your hands regularly or use hand sanitizer. We do have to recommit as a collective to take care of ourselves and each other if we are to keep our cases low and our outbreaks minimal.
ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਦੇ ਚੀਫ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਵਿਲੀਅਮ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਅੰਦਰ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੇ ਵਾਧੇ ਤੇ ਚਿੰਤਾ ਪ੍ਰਗਟਾਈ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜੂਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਦੋਂ 300 ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਣ। ਡਾਕਟਰ ਵਿਲੀਅਮ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਵਾਧੇ ਅੰਕੜੇ ਸਿਹਤ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਜਾਗਰੂਕਤਾ ਕਾਲ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਸਥਿਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਭਲਣ ਲਈ ਪੂਰੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤਿਆਰੀਆਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ।
The numbers is 313. Is our first time over 300 since, well, the last day we had over that was June the 7th. There was a bit of a data issue back then, as some may recall, with data entry from one of the centers. But even that week prior, we were over 300 every day during that week, and over 400 on June the 2nd. So that number is concerning. It gives us a wake-up call to say to the public that while we have flattened the curve on the first time through, a number of things with opening up stage 3, secondary, post-secondary school institutions having students coming back in, as well as with schools starting up in various parts of the province, it means we have to re-energize our vigilance and dedication to being careful with all the points that Dr. Yaffe had alluded to, and earlier today the Minister and the Premier had also noted. So we can't become casual on that. I think some people during the end of summer have a sense of, okay, let's just go and let things be. But you're seeing now we're a week after Labor Day, and we're starting to see the pop-up of those numbers there, certainly in some high-risk populations, as Dr. Yaffe has noted already. And we're seeing also, on the good side, a number of people going to get tested at various assessment centers, even because that some have admitted, as you've heard some commentary on me, that I guess we went to an event and we probably were less than careful, and we want to make sure we're going to ensure the rest of the people in our social circle or group are protected, so we're going to get tested. So in that way, it's a good response to probably a poor decision, and not probably, it was a poor decision, and we want people to refocus back on that. So can we beat down this one in flattening this blip, because we had some of those different models of what it would look like. Some asked, is this similar to what we saw rising up to the first one?
ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਡਗ ਫੋਰਡ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕਰੋਨਾ ਵਾਇਰਸ ਦੀ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਨੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਮਤਿਹਾਨ ਲਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਪਰਖ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕਰੋਨਾ ਵਾਇਰਸ ਦੀ ਦੂਜੀ ਛਾਲ ਆ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਅੰਦਰ ਕਰੋਨਾ ਦੇ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਵਧ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਲਈ ਸੂਬੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਲੋਕਡਾਊਨ ਲਗਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਸਥਿਤੀ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ।
This pandemic has put us to the test. It's tested us as a government and as a people. And all through the summer, we worked together to get the economy going again, to open the province back up, to get ready for the start of school. We worked together to keep the case count down, and we've had tremendous success. Together, we kept the numbers down all summer. But we all know that a second wave of this virus is coming. We see it all over the world. This virus is still amongst us, and it's spreading. So the only question left is, how bad will the second wave be? And the answer to that question is up to all of us. It's up to you. It's up to the 14.5 million people in this province. We've shown what we can achieve when we work together. Together, we got those numbers down. We flattened the curve on the first wave. But we're not out of the woods. And today's numbers, they're a cause for concern for all of us. And let me be crystal clear. Every option is on the table. We will take every step necessary, including further shutdowns. In the second wave of COVID-19, it's a scenario that we have been preparing for all summer long. And today, we're in much better shape. When it comes to testing, we have dozens of companies in Ontario manufacturing PPE. We have invested billions of dollars to expand capacity in our healthcare system. We have not been waiting for things to get worse before we take action. We've been working around the clock for months, getting ready for the second wave. And that's why we return to the House today with clear plans to protect and support Ontario. My friends, our legislative priorities have never been more clear, and you will hear from us shortly. As we roll out plans to keep Ontario safe, you will hear more from us in the coming days about how we will continue to support families in our most
ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਦੇ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਸਟੀਫਨ ਲੀਚੇ ਨੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਖੋਲ੍ਹੇ ਜਾਣ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਵਟਾਂਦਰਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਰੇਕ ਸਹੂਲਤ ਅਤੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਤੋਂ ਬਚਾਅ ਲਈ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ $1.4 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਦਾ ਪੈਕੇਜ ਖਰਚਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ।
We have been working with directors of education, making it well known our expectation that we allocate about $1.4 billion on an annual basis to maintain schools, particularly, for example, for HVAC and airflow systems. Earlier on through this process, school boards conducted a review to understand where the schools with the highest needs, the older schools with older HVAC systems, for example, they prioritize those schools that have been able to see significant improvements to their airflow systems, be it in new HVAC systems on the whole, improvements to air filtration systems, or mobile filtration systems that have been procured. Now, the province has unveiled an additional $50 million on top of that $1.4 billion allocation. That $1.4 billion flowed, school boards used it, and they put it to where the highest needs schools are, the older schools that required more of that investment. The $50 million we've unveiled, we made it very clear. We want to see those dollars out the door immediately by Thanksgiving. We've given them a deadline imposed to make sure that that next tranche of schools and additional improvements can be made. And school boards are working very hard to procure as many of these products as humanly possible. And we've seen improvements province-wide. I was in Durham just a few weeks ago, meeting with some of the individuals responsible for HVAC, and they were telling me that in the older schools, all of them received some improvement, and that's the investment coming from the provincial government. So we're going to continue to make airflow a priority. It's this government that invested an additional $50 million to do that, and we recognize that. Certainly in the coming weeks, I've seen many schools, listening to our guidance, actually take their classrooms outside. Just a few days ago, I was in Niagara region with the parliamentary assistant with Sam Ustroff, and we met educators and principals, and they brought their classrooms outdoors. That experiential learning, which is really making a difference, I know parents appreciate.
ਕੇਂਦਰੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਲੇਖਕ ਸਭਾ ਦੀ ਸਤੰਬਰ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਪ੍ਰਸਿੱਧ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਾਵਲਕਾਰ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਕੇਸਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਰਪਿਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਜ਼ੂਮ ਉੱਪਰ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਹੋਈ ਇਸ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਜਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਭੁੱਲਰ ਅਤੇ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲ ਗੁਰਬਖਸ਼ ਸਿੰਘ ਸ਼ੇਰਗਿੱਲ ਦੀ ਸਦੀਵੀ ਵਿਛੋੜੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਦੁੱਖ ਪ੍ਰਗਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਸਭਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸ਼ਰਧਾਂਜਲੀ ਭੇਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਇਨਕਲਾਬੀ ਕਵੀ ਪਾਸ਼ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਰਚਨਾਤਮਕ ਦੌਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਾਟ ਪਿੰਡਰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਲਿਖਾਰੀ ਸਾਹਿਤ ਸਭਾ ਸਿਆਟਲ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਿੰਦਰਪਾਲ ਔਜਲਾ, ਸੁਖਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੋਦਲਾ ਅਤੇ ਸਕੱਤਰ ਬਲਿਹਾਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਲਹਿਲ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਸੁਖੀ ਸਿੱਧੂ, ਹਰਬੰਸ ਕੌਰ ਬੈਂਸ, ਸੁਖਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਗਿੱਲ, ਸੁਰਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਮਾਧੋਪੁਰੀ, ਪ੍ਰਿਤਪਾਲ ਗਿੱਲ ਅਤੇ ਪਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਰੰਧਾਵਾ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਰਚਨਾਵਾਂ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ। ਅੰਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਿਤਪਾਲ ਗਿੱਲ ਨੇ ਸਭਾ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ। ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਸੰਚਾਲਨ ਪਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਰੰਧਾਵਾ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ। ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਇਸ ਬੁਲਟਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।